The next morning, just as the sun was beginning to break through the windows, a new student, Lantry, arrived at the school. Lantry was a prominent figure with striking facial features and immediately attracted the attention of others. He was a young and energetic guy who immediately gained popularity with his charisma and good nature. He was particularly interested in getting to know Emily. Lantry spotted her in art class, where she was sitting in a corner working on her new project. Emily was painting on a large canvas, her brush gliding quickly over the surface, creating picturesque, abstract shapes. She had a notebook full of sketches and notes, which she kept next to her, and there was an expression of concentration and fascination on her face. After the lesson, Lantry decided to approach Emily. He wanted to get to know her, but he didn't know how to start a conversation. As he approached her desk, he noticed that she had finished her work and was about to put away her supplies. "Hi, Emily," Lantry said, trying to sound casual. "I'm Lantry. I really liked your drawings. They're really impressive." Emily raised her head, looking at the new guy in surprise. "Oh, thank you. I try to put as much emotion and ideas into my work as possible." Lantry was pleasantly surprised by her openness. "I noticed that you always write a lot in your diary. You probably think a lot about different things, right?" Emily smiled, but her eyes darkened a little as she recalled her recent night struggle. "Yes, I write to sort out my thoughts and feelings." Lantry was interested in her answers and suggested that they meet later and talk about her hobbies. "Maybe we could discuss your work over a cup of coffee? I'd like to know more about your paintings and what inspires you." Emily thought about it and agreed. "That sounds great. Let's meet at the cafe on campus after class." After Emily agreed to meet Lantry, they both continued their day at school. Lantry felt excited about the upcoming meeting because he rarely managed to establish contact with someone new so easily, especially with such a mysterious and interesting girl like Emily. When classes ended, Emily headed for the campus cafe. It was a cozy place with large windows through which warm light penetrated, creating an atmosphere of comfort and peace. She sat down at a table by the window and began flipping through her notebook, waiting for Lantry. Soon he appeared in the doorway, smiling and carrying 2 cups of coffee. He sat down next to her and carefully placed one of the cups in front of Emily. She smiled as she accepted the coffee. "So what do you think about when you paint?" Lantry asked, taking a sip. "It always seemed to me that artists have so much in their heads, and it all somehow translates into their work." Emily put down her notebook and thought about it. "For me, drawing is a way to express what I can't say in words. It's like a language that I invented for myself to deal with the world around me. Sometimes I don't even fully understand what I'm painting myself until the work is finished." Lantry nodded with interest. "It sounds like you put a piece of your soul into every painting. I probably don't feel that deeply about my studies. I don't have the creative gift you have. But I've always admired those who can create something beautiful." Emily looked at him with a slight smile. "Everyone has something different. Maybe you just need to find something that really lights up inside." Lantry thought for a moment and then decided to ask, "What inspires you? Where do you find your ideas?" "All around," she replied, glancing outside, where a light breeze was stirring the leaves on the trees. "Sometimes it's music, sometimes it's a book or a movie, and sometimes it's just a walk in the park. The world is full of little things that can awaken the imagination if you look closely." He nodded, impressed by her words. "I'm not very good at art, but I've always wanted to learn how to see the world the way artists do, to see beauty in ordinary things." Emily smiled. "It's not that difficult. You just need to slow down and stop rushing. Then you start to notice colors, textures, sounds. All this adds up to images in your head, which can then be expressed on paper or canvas." They continued to talk, and Lantry noticed that Emily was opening up to him by the minute. Her calm and gentle nature made him feel relaxed and comfortable. He learned that she had been passionate about art since childhood and often spent time alone, painting or reading. Her parents supported her passion, and at school she found in the visual arts her refuge from everyday worries. Emily told him that her dream was to enroll in a prestigious art institute and one day have her own exhibition. Her voice trembled with excitement as she talked about it, and Lantry felt how important it was to her. "I'm sure you'll succeed," he said, feeling sincere admiration. "You are really talented, and it seems to me that you have everything to achieve your goals." Emily thanked him for his support, but her gaze became thoughtful. "I often think about how much depends on luck. Even if you have talent, you don't always manage to break through." After Emily and Lantry finished talking in the cafe, they both felt that there was a strong bond between them. The evening ended on a pleasant note. Something in their conversation left Emily slightly worried. Her head was full of thoughts about the future, about her art, and about how strangely and quickly her relationship with Lantry had changed. They stood side by side in silence until they heard a strange sound outside the window. Emily shuddered, and Lantry, without letting go of her hand, went to the window to see what was going on. Outside the windows, at the edge of the forest, stood a woman. She was dressed in white, face was hidden under a hood. Figure seemed unreal, as if she was a reflection from the past. Emily froze, breathing coming fast and ragged. "You see this?" she whispered. Lantry nodded, his gaze still fixed on the woman. Her figure did not move. Lantry and Emily continued to stare at the strange figure outside the window. Presence seemed unreal and restless. Lantry tried to remain calm, but his fingers held Emily's hand tightly so that she wouldn't feel even more insecure. "Emily, maybe it's just someone from the area," Lantry said, trying to sound convincing. "Let's not panic. Maybe it's just some random passerby." He gently pulled Emily to the far corner of the hut so they could discuss the situation away from the window. Emily could still feel her heart pounding, but her excitement had subsided a little thanks to Lantry's support. "But why is she standing there, not moving?" Emily whispered. "Weird." Lantry nodded. "Yes, really weird. Maybe it's just someone who wants to find shelter. We probably shouldn't pay attention to this and just continue our walk." Emily decided to try to distract herself and return to drawing. However, her hands were still shaking, and her drawings were chaotic and featureless. Lantry noticed this and decided to help. He reached for his painting kit and offered to help Emily. "Let's try to do something together," he suggested. "Maybe it'll distract you." They began to paint together, and gradually, the atmosphere in the hut became less tense. Lantry tried to make the process as exciting and relaxing as possible. He talked about his favorite artists, how his family was passionate about art, and tried to make Emily smile. Despite this, at some point their attention was again attracted by the figure outside the window. When Lantry looked there again, he noticed that the woman was now moving, figure sliding towards the forest. Lantry felt they needed to figure out what was going on, and suggested that Emily go back to the car. "Emily, I think we should go back. We've spent enough time here," Lantry said, trying to show that he wasn't scared. "Let's just get out of here." They carefully packed up their belongings and left the hut. It was refreshingly cool outside, and the sunlight filtering through the trees calmed them down a bit. Lantry and Emily walked back to the car, discussing how they could spend the rest of the day. "How about we go to the lake that I found nearby?" Lantry suggested. "It will be nice and peaceful there." "You know," Emily said, looking out at the water, "it's nice to be here with you. I didn't expect our time together to be so special." Lantry smiled, his face softened. "It's nice for me too. I'm glad I can be here for you." As evening approached, Lantry suggested they spend the night in a small house near the lake so they could relax and enjoy the privacy. Emily was a little surprised, but agreed, believing that this might be a good opportunity to spend more time together and get to know each other better. When they arrived at the house, Lantry made everything comfortable. He laid out blankets and placed candles, creating a cozy atmosphere. They continued the conversation, and soon the conversation became more personal. Lantry shared his feelings about his family and his own problems, and Emily opened up about her fears and insecurities. "I often feel that my fears and failures haunt me," Emily said, "but when I'm with you, I feel like I can handle it." As the evening drew to a close, Lantry and Emily settled down on the couch in the cozy house he had prepared for them. The candlelight flickered, creating a soft atmosphere. The weather was warm and the evening promised to be calm, but something still hung in the air as if unsaid. After they talked for a while, Lantry suggested looking at an old photo album he found in the house. The album contained photos of places they had already visited and vintage shots of the area where they were. Emily started flipping through the pages and soon came across a photo of the abandoned cabin they had seen today. "This hut looks exactly like the one we were in," she remarked. "How strange. Maybe someone left photos when there were still people here." Lantry nodded. "Yes, it's really interesting. Let's try to find out more about this place. Maybe this will help us understand what we saw." They continued to look at the album and soon found another photo. It showed a hut, but in the background there was a woman in white standing by a tree. The woman's face was blurred, but her figure looked familiar. "Look," Emily said, pointing at the photo. "This is exactly the figure we saw today." Lantry, noticing her agitation, tried to calm her down. "Don't worry, it might just be a coincidence. Perhaps it's an old photo that accidentally got into the album." Nevertheless, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of anxiety. She got up and went to the kitchen to pour herself some water. Lantry followed her and offered her another cup of tea to help her relax. When they returned to the living room, Lantry noticed that Emily had become more thoughtful and perhaps even more worried. To change the mood, he suggested a walk around the area around the house. "Let's go outside and get some fresh air. I'm sure it will help you relax," he suggested. Emily agreed, and they went outside. The night was warm, and the sounds of nature were soothing. They walked along the lake, and Lantry tried to keep up the conversation to distract Emily from her anxious thoughts. Suddenly, Lantry noticed that in the woods, not far from their road, something glinted in the light of the moon. He pointed this out to Emily. "Do you see this?" he asked. "What could it be?" Emily looked closer and saw that something like an antique object was flickering in the moonlight. They decided to check what it was. Soon they reached a small old cemetery hidden among the trees. "It's so quiet and creepy here," Emily said, feeling her fears return. Lantry hugged her to comfort her. "We're here together, and I promise we'll check everything out." In the cemetery, they found an ancient grave monument that looked like it was from another era. The monument was engraved with strange symbols and dates that they could not understand. Suddenly, they noticed that there was a small hole under the monument, from which an old chest was peeking out. Lantry, having a slight excitement, opened the chest, and inside he found old letters and magazines covered with dust. The letters were addressed to a man named David Montgomery, and they described mysterious events and research related to this region. When Lantry and Emily discovered the old chest in the cemetery, their excitement changed to a thrill of expectation. Inside the chest, in addition to letters and magazines, they also found an old photograph. It showed a man standing outside a hut. There was an inscription under the photo, "David Montgomery, the last day before he disappeared." Emily and Lantry studied the find carefully. "There's clearly something important here," Emily said. "But what exactly?" Lantry, sensing that they needed to move on, suggested the following. "Since we have already found some things that may be related to this person, let's try to find even more information in the house that we rented. Maybe there is something there that will help us understand who this David Montgomery is and why his mention causes us so much anxiety." When they returned to the house, Emily, not knowing exactly what to look for, began checking old books and magazines that they found in the trunk. She came across a diary that was almost empty, but at the end of the diary she found a note. "I understand that it may seem strange to you, but I have to tell you the truth. What happened in this place has nothing to do with mysticism or the supernatural. It's all about human actions and consequence. I'm leaving this to you so that you can understand how everything is connected here." "It sounds like someone is trying to tell us what's going on here," Emily said after reading the note aloud. Lantry nodded. "Let's see what else is in this diary." As they studied the diary, they found several records of conflicts between residents of the area and owners of local businesses that used forest resources. The diary described how residents began to notice mysterious disappearances and began to associate them with the actions of those who wanted to use the forest to their advantage. One of the records indicated that David Montgomery was one of those who tried to expose illegal activities and protect local residents. He feared for his life, and perhaps that's why he disappeared to avoid revenge. This is starting to look like a real story about the struggle for justice, Emily remarked. Maybe the person who disappeared left us clues about what's really going on in this place. Lantry and Emily became more attentive to their surroundings and realized that this place was connected with the same conflicts that the diary described. Deciding to use the information from the diary, they tried to find people who might be familiar with the history of the area. They found out that some of the locals still remembered the old rumors and could share additional information. One of these people was an elderly woman named Greta, who lived in the house next door. She told them about old cases and disagreements that happened many years ago. Greta recalled that David Montgomery was an active defender of the locals, and her own family was also involved in this conflict. My father knew Montgomery, Greta said. He helped him, but then they both disappeared and no one knew what happened to them. Some say they have found a way to solve the problem, but no one knows how. Emily and Lantry were shocked. They decided that they needed to learn more about those times and about the people who could be connected with the disappearance of David Montgomery. They soon learned that there had been another key participant in the past, a construction contractor named James Haston, who could have been involved in illegal activities in the forest. Their research led them to the archives of local newspapers, where they found an article about a lawsuit in which Heston was accused of corruption and illegal logging. The article mentioned that Heston used his influence to hide the traces of his activities and eliminate those who tried to expose him. Understanding that all this is connected with corruption and local scandals, the case of Emily and Lantry takes a new look at the situation. They began contacting local residents and collecting evidence to finally uncover the truth about what really happened to David Montgomery and why this place still bears traces of the past. As Lantry and Emily got closer to the cemetery, their footsteps became more cautious. The moon through the trees created long shadows, and everything seemed to be immersed in semi-darkness. On the graves there were ancient tombstones covered with moss and famously dusted with leaves. In the center of the cemetery, right under the light of the moon, they saw an ancient stone monument with intricate ornaments. "This place seems forgotten," Emily said, her voice low and trembling. "There shouldn't be people here." Lantry examined the monument and noticed that there was something on its surface that looked like ancient signs and symbols. He ran his finger over the inscriptions, trying to figure out what they meant. Something about this place seemed familiar to him, but he couldn't figure out where exactly. "Look," Lantry said, pointing to one of the symbols. "This sign is similar to the one in the book in the hut." Emily turned her attention back to the monument. "Yes, it's true. Perhaps these symbols are somehow related to what we saw." They continued to explore the cemetery and soon came across an old half-buried gravestone with a special ornament, which was also depicted in the book. This reinforced their suspicions that all these elements were somehow connected. "Maybe it has something to do with the history of this place," Lantry suggested. "Maybe we should try to figure out who these people are and why this place seems so mysterious." Emily nodded. Her anxiety eased a little due to the fact that she felt less alone. "Yes, it's possible. We could look for information in the library or the school's archive. Maybe there's something there that will help us figure it out." They decided that in the morning, they would look for information about the cemetery and the history of this place. Meanwhile, in order not to leave disturbing thoughts in their heads, they returned to the house where Lantry offered to drink tea to relax before going to bed. As they drank tea and discussed their findings, the conversation became less tense. They continued to exchange stories and personal experiences, and soon felt a deep mutual understanding between them. "You know, I'm glad we met," Lantry said, looking at Emily with genuine interest. "This night could have been a lot worse if it wasn't for your company." Emily smiled and replied, "I'm glad you're here too. You've made me feel a little better, despite all the weirdness we see." With that, they went to bed, trying to leave their fears and worries outside their thoughts. But despite this, it was difficult for both of them to completely relax, and they decided that they would go in search of answers early in the morning. The next morning, they went to the school library as planned. Lantry and Emily began to search for books and documents that could shed light on the mysterious events. Emily found some old archival records and newspaper clippings that mentioned the abandoned cemetery and its mysterious history. Turned out that a small settlement once existed in this area, which was abandoned after a series of tragic events. The cemetery was associated with these events, and the inscriptions on the monuments were associated with rituals and traditions that were popular in the past. "We found some interesting things," Emily said, showing Lantry the old documents. "Seems that this place was connected with some ancient rituals. This may explain why we see such strange phenomena." Lantry looked at the documents and felt that their investigation was just beginning. "Yes, it's very interesting. We will need to learn more about these rituals and the connections to what we have seen." They continued their research and soon found references to strange appearances and mystical events associated with this place. This confirmed their assumption that the mysteries they see have deep roots in the area's past. In the evening, they returned to the lake to discuss their findings and think about further actions. Their conversation was filled with new questions and hypotheses, but they felt that they had become closer to each other and were now ready for new discoveries together.